I didn't even get a goodbye or a sorry to hear that. Within 20 minutes of me telling Elena that the Pennsylvania State Pension Board had frozen my accounts due to an identity theft investigation, the active now blue dot next to her name just vanished. I sat there in my kitchen in Scranton watching that screen like it was a diagnostic tool on a failing furnace. I sent one last message. Elena, are you there? I'm scared. It stayed on sent. No delivered. No read. 6 months of daily I love yous and $14,250 of my hard-earned money were erased faster than a spam email. I stared at that gray circle where her face used to be. My heart was thumping against my ribs like a trapped bird. I kept refreshing the page, praying for a glitch, wanting to believe the internet in Romania had just cut out or her phone had died. But deep down, I knew. The pension test I'd just run had come back positive. The machine was broken. $14,000. That's what it cost me to find out that I Love You has a very specific expiration date. It expires exactly 1 second after the bank account hits zero. If you think your business experience makes you bulletproof, you're exactly the kind of target they're looking for. I spent 35 years running an HVAC business, crawling through frozen attics and fixing things people couldn't see, and I thought I was the one in control. I thought I'd finally found that traditional partner everyone talks about, but within 20 minutes of failing her financial check, I wasn't a fiancé anymore. I wasn't even a person. I was just a dead lead. To understand how I ended up sitting in the dark, realizing I'd just bought my freedom for the price of a used truck, we have to go back to a very quiet Friday night in Pennsylvania, when the silence in my 4-bedroom house finally became louder than I could stand. I spent 35 years in Scranton building a life out of copper pipes, sheet metal, and pressurized coolant. If you've never been to Scranton in February, when the wind comes off the mountains and the temperature hits 10 below, an HVAC contractor is the most important man in town. I was that man. 3.5 decades crawling through frozen crawl spaces and sweltering attics, fixing boilers and AC units for people who were having the worst day of their year. You don't survive that kind of business for 30 years if you're a pushover or a fool. You have to be technical, you have to be precise, and you have to know how to spot a leak before it ruins the whole system. By the time I hung up my gauges 2 years ago, I'd built a foundation I was proud of. I wasn't a millionaire, but I'd done well for a guy who started with a used van and a toolbox. I had $420,000 in my 401k. My monthly pension from the state board was locked in at $3,150. I owned my 4-bedroom house on a quiet cul-de-sac outright. No mortgage, no debt. A property valued at $210,000 that I'd maintained with my own 2 hands for 30 years. On paper, I was the American success story. I had the security, I had the health, and I had all the time in the world. But a 4-bedroom house is a very large place when you're the only one breathing in it. My wife, Diane, was my high school sweetheart. We were married for 29 years, and we had a rhythm that didn't require words. She knew I took my coffee black, and I knew she wanted the thermostat set to 68, not 67. She passed away 3 years ago from an illness that took her so fast it felt like a robbery. Not a long goodbye. Just a Tuesday she was fine, and then she wasn't, and then she was gone. After she was gone, the silence in that house started to have a weight to it. I'd find myself standing in the kitchen at 3 in the morning, listening to the hum of the refrigerator, wondering why I'd worked so hard to build a life that was now just a collection of empty rooms. 4 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a lawn that looked perfect, and a refrigerator that was never quite full enough for one person. I wasn't looking for a trophy wife. I wasn't going through a midlife crisis trying to buy back my youth. I just wanted what I had before, a traditional partner, someone who valued family and would appreciate the stability I'd spent 40 years creating. I kept hearing that those values didn't exist in the States anymore, that everything here had become a transaction or a competition. One Friday night, I was sitting at my kitchen table eating a Salisbury steak out of a plastic tray, watching a travel vlog about Bucharest. The narrator talked about the safety, the old world charm, and the women who still believed in taking care of a home and a husband. It felt like a sign. That now or never feeling I hadn't felt since I opened my business came surging back. That same night, I signed up for an international dating site and paid the $60 membership fee. I thought I was being smart. I thought I was using my business logic to solve my personal loneliness. I told myself, Gary, you know how to vet a subcontractor. You can certainly vet a person. That's when I found Elena, 38, a dental assistant from Brasov. Her profile didn't have professional headshots. It had pictures of her in a garden and one of her holding a tray of stuffed cabbage. She looked like someone who knew how to work, someone who understood the value of a dollar. We started Skyping every day. For the first 2 months, we didn't talk about money once. She talked about her mother's cooking, how she missed the way things used to be, how she wanted a man who was serious. She made me feel like I was being seen for who I was, not just what I could provide. But looking back, she wasn't looking at me at all. She was just checking the pressure in the lines, waiting for the right moment to turn the valve. The first leak appeared in month 2. Elena told me her laptop screen had gone black. She was crying because she couldn't see my face anymore, and the internet cafe near her apartment was dangerous at night. My business brain kicked in immediately. You can't have the communication lines down if you're trying to build a foundation. I went down to the Best Buy, picked out a MacBook for $1,200, and shipped it to her. I justified it as the cost of doing business. If you want a quality connection, you have to maintain the equipment. By month 3, I decided it was time for a site inspection. I booked a flight on Lufthansa, $1,150 from Philly to Bucharest, which is a lot of residential service calls just to buy one seat over the Atlantic. I didn't want some cheap hostel. I wanted to show her I was a man of substance. I booked a room at the Radisson Blu on Calais Victoria for $180 a night. In Scranton, $180 gets you a suite with a jacuzzi and a view of a parking lot. In Bucharest, it gets you a marble lobby and a staff that treats you like a visiting head of state. For a guy who spent his life in blue coveralls, being called sir by a man in a tuxedo, while a woman who looked like Elena held my arm, it was intoxicating. It was the ROI I'd been waiting for. I felt like I was finally being compensated for every frozen attic and every sweltering crawl space I'd ever been in. When I landed and saw her standing at the airport in a simple wool coat, holding a single red rose, the air was freezing, but I didn't feel the cold. She smelled like vanilla and cold air when she hugged me. In that moment, the $1,200 I'd sent her the month before for that MacBook felt like the best investment I'd ever made. That first week was a blur of high-pressure euphoria. We ate at Caru Cubere, a massive vaulted beer hall that looks like a cathedral for people who love roasted pork and heavy timber. The beer was cold, the choir was singing in the balcony, and Elena sat across from me, her eyes reflecting the candlelight. She talked about how Romanian women still believe in the old ways. She said she didn't want a career or a competition. She wanted a home to take care of and a man strong enough to lead. She told me I had kind eyes and that she could tell I was a man of my word. I'm a practical guy, but hearing that from a beautiful woman while eating a $30 steak makes you feel like you've discovered a secret the rest of the world has forgotten. I spent $3,500 that week and didn't regret a dime of it. I bought her a leather coat from a boutique near the Romanian Athenaeum, $800, and it fit her like it was made for her. I watched her look at herself in the mirror, and for the first time in 3 years, I didn't feel like a widower. I felt like a provider, a man who still had a purpose. We took a trip up to Brasov, her hometown, and the mountain air was so clean it felt like it was scrubbing the Scranton soot out of my lungs. Then the first system alert happened. We were supposed to meet her brother Stefan for dinner. An hour before, she got a call and started crying. Stefan's transmission had completely blown out on the highway. He was stranded, and the car was their only way to get their mother to doctor's appointments. She didn't ask me for money. She just sat on the edge of the hotel bed and sobbed about how the universe doesn't want us to be happy. I'm an HVAC guy. I know what a blown transmission means. It's a problem you solve with parts and labor. I told her, Elena, stop crying. How much to fix it? An hour later, she came back and said a mechanic could do it for $1,500 if we paid cash. I sat there in that beautiful hotel room, looked at the snow falling on the Carpathian Mountains, and thought, Gary, you've got $400,000 in the bank. You're going to let this girl's family suffer over $1,500? That's what a traditional man does. He steps up. I went to an ATM, pulled out the Romanian lei, and handed it to her. She looked at me like I was a hero. She told me her mother would pray for me every night. I flew back to Pennsylvania 10 days later, sitting in that Lufthansa seat, feeling like the smartest man in Scranton. I'd seen the city, I'd held the woman, and I'd vetted the family. I'd spent nearly $7,000 in total, but I looked at it as the down payment on the rest of my life. I walked back into my empty 4-bedroom house, and for the first time the silence didn't feel heavy. It felt temporary. I started looking at engagement rings at a jeweler on Spruce Street and calculating the cost of a K-1 visa. I went into the master bathroom, looked at the dated 1990s tiling, and actually started sketching out a remodel in my head. New vanity, walk-in shower with the rainfall head, maybe some heated floors. I was 64 and I was planning a future like a kid just starting his first apprentice job. I was so busy looking at the beautiful finish on the new system that I completely ignored the fact that the pressure gauges were already in the red. I didn't realize that in the world of international romance, a broken transmission is just a standard diagnostic tool used to see exactly how much pressure a target can handle before they crack. I was about to find out that the $1,500 for the car was just the setup fee for the real heist, and it was all going to start with a phone call about a gallbladder. Then came the gallbladder call. It was a Wednesday afternoon. I was at the grocery store picking out a loaf of bread when my phone buzzed. Elena was in a hospital hallway, bad lighting, flickering fluorescent tubes, the kind you only see in old movies or bad hospitals. She was hysterical. Her mother had collapsed in the kitchen, and the paramedics had taken her to the state hospital in Brasov. She turned the camera around to show me the ward. It looked like a basement from the 1950s. Peeling paint, rusted gurneys, 6 people to a room with a single window that didn't open. She was whispering into the phone, saying the doctors wouldn't even look at her mother unless she tipped the nurses first. She called the place a death trap. I stood there in the bread aisle in Scranton, and I felt that old HVAC instinct kick in, the one that tells you a boiler is about to crack and you have to move fast. The system was in crisis. In the HVAC world, when the pressure alarm goes off, you don't stand in the aisle thinking about the cost. You move. She told me the only way to save her mother was to transfer her to a private clinic called Central Medical Speranza. They required a deposit up front for the gallbladder surgery and a private room. The number was $4,500. Now look, I'm a guy who spent 35 years dealing with building inspectors and subcontractors. I know when I'm being squeezed, but I also know that when a system is under that much pressure, you don't argue with the gauge, you bleed the line. I stood there in that grocery store and I thought about Diane. I thought about those last weeks with her, how I would have given every single cent in that 401k just to have one more Tuesday night. I told Elena, don't cry, get her in the car. I'm going to the Western Union right now. I drove to the supermarket service counter. I filled out the form, $4,500 plus the transfer fees. When the clerk handed me the receipt, I felt a twinge of something. Not quite regret, more like that feeling you get when you've replaced a compressor and the unit starts up. but the amp draw is just a little too high. You know it's running, but you know it's not running right. I told myself it was just stress. I told myself a traditional man doesn't count his pennies when his future family is in crisis. I drove home and waited by the phone for the call that her mother was safe. 2 days later, the surgery was successful. Elena sent me pictures of her mother in a clean white bed, surrounded by monitors that actually looked like they were plugged in. She called me her American angel. She said her mother wanted to kiss my hands. For a week, the euphoria was back. I was the provider. I was the hero. I went back to the jeweler on Spruce Street and put a deposit on a 2-carat diamond ring. I was all in. I was already calculating the K1 visa timeline, already sketching out the guest bedroom in my head, wondering whether Elena would want new curtains or to keep Diane's old ones. But then came the system failure. 10 days after the surgery, the tone of the calls changed. Elena wasn't talking about gardens or peonies anymore. She was talking about complications. The private clinic was charging an extra $3,000 for specialized post-op medication that wasn't covered in the initial quote. And then, in the same breath, she told me she'd gone to the embassy about her B2 visitor visa. A consultant told her the only way to move up the interview was to pay an expediting fee of $1,500. Plus, she needed to show financial solvency in her bank account, another $1,500, or they'd deny her for being a migration risk. $6,000 total. I didn't reach for my wallet. I reached for a yellow legal pad. I'm a numbers guy. I started adding it up. $1,200 for the laptop, $3,500 for the trip, $1,500 for the brother's car, $4,500 for the surgery. I was already $14,250 deep, and now she wanted another $6,000. That's when the building inspector in my brain finally woke up. I know what a visa costs. I'd looked it up. A B2 visa application fee is $185. There is no such thing as a $1,500 expediting fee paid to a back alley consultant. And Central Medical Speranza? I'd tried to find their website the night before. All I found was a Facebook page with 3 photos and a phone number that went straight to voicemail in Romanian. No physical address, no business registration, nothing I could put my hands on. The cold knot in my stomach turned into a block of ice. I wasn't being loved, I was being serviced, I was a job site. She was checking my oil to see how much she could drain before the engine seized. I looked at the diamond ring receipt on the table and felt like the biggest fool in the state of Pennsylvania, but I didn't get angry. You don't get angry at a broken furnace. You diagnose it. I realized I had a central conflict I couldn't ignore anymore. I was terrified that I was too old, too used up, and too boring for a woman like Elena to actually want me, that I had nothing left to offer except my bank account. And she knew it. She had sniffed out that insecurity like a gas leak and was using my own traditional values against me, making me feel like a coward if I didn't keep the money flowing. I needed to run a diagnostic that would tell me if there was any real left in this relationship, or if the whole thing was a hollowed-out shell. In the HVAC world, if you think a compressor is shot, you cut the electricity and see if the backup kicks in. I was going to cut the financial power and see exactly what Elena was made of. I was going to run the pension test. I waited for our 9 p.m. Skype call. When her face appeared on the screen, she had that expectant look, the one a subcontractor gives you when they're waiting for the final check. She had her phone on the desk beside her. She looked like a woman who had somewhere else to be. Before she could say hello, I put on my devastated face, leaned into the camera, and delivered the lie I'd spent 3 hours crafting on a legal pad. I told her I'd received a letter from the Pennsylvania State Pension Board, a massive identity theft investigation involving my Social Security number. They had frozen my monthly pension payments and my 401k until a 90-day forensic audit could be completed. My credit cards were declined. I couldn't even pay my own electric bill. I let the silence of my dark kitchen fill the space between us. Then I said, Elena, I'm so sorry. I can't send the 6,000. In fact, I was wondering if you could wire me $500 from what's left of the surgery money just so I can buy groceries this month. I watched her face. Every muscle, every micro-expression. The traditional partner mask didn't just slip. It evaporated like moisture off a hot manifold. Her face, which had been soft and expectant 20 seconds ago, turned into a mask of cold, hard calculation. She didn't ask if I was okay. She didn't ask how I was going to eat. She didn't say, "We will get through this together." She just stared at the screen, her eyes darting toward her phone off camera. I saw her jaw set into a rigid line, the exact look of a contractor realizing a client's check is going to bounce. "I have to call my brother," she said. Her voice was flat, completely stripped of every trace of the warmth she'd used for 6 months. The call ended. I sat in the dark. I didn't move. I kept the chat window open and watched. 9:04 p.m. The blue Active Now dot next to her name was steady. I watched it like a pressure gauge on a boiler that's 2 pounds away from the red line. 9:08 p.m. Elena is typing appeared at the bottom of the screen. I held my breath. The indicator pulsed for 3 full minutes. Then it stopped. Nothing was sent. She had written something and deleted it. She was figuring out her exit. 9:12 p.m. I typed, "Elena, I'm really scared. Are you there?" It marked as delivered. 9:15 p.m. No response. The blue dot was still there, mocking me. I realized she wasn't calling her brother. She was checking the exit signs, seeing if there was any other way to drain the system before she shut it down entirely. 9:18 p.m. "Elena, please, I just need to know you're with me." I hit enter. The message stayed on sent, not delivered. She had started the block. The blue dot flickered once, then it turned gray. I refreshed the page. Her profile picture vanished. The Active Now status disappeared. I clicked on her name, but the text box was gone. In its place was a cold, system-generated line of text. "User not found." I went to her Facebook page. "This content is no longer available." I tried her WhatsApp. 1 gray checkmark, no last seen, no about section. In exactly 20 minutes, less time than it takes to eat a ham sandwich, Elena, the woman who wanted to plant peonies in my backyard and said her mother would pray for me every night, had erased me from existence. The $14,250 I'd sent her was gone. The mother's surgery at Central Medical Speranza, the brother's broken transmission, the MacBook. It was all just the cost of a high-end theatrical production, where I was the only one who didn't know the script. I sat there in the silence of my 4-bedroom house, staring at a gray silhouette on a screen, finally understanding that the only traditional thing about the last 6 months was the way I'd been fleeced. The machine was dead, the power was cut, and I was sitting in the dark, completely alone. I'm still sitting in that same 4-bedroom house in Scranton. The master bathroom is still tiled in that dated 1990s beige because I never did the remodel. Never bought that rainfall shower head. Never installed the heated floors I'd sketched out on a napkin the night I got home from Bucharest. I'm out $14,250, exactly 4.5 months of my state pension, or the price of the used Ford F-150 I was planning to buy myself for my 65th birthday. But here's the real number. I still have $405,000 in my 401k. I still own my home. I still have my dignity. I paid $14,000 in tuition for a crash course in human nature, and even though it hurts to admit I was the student, I'm glad I graduated before the bill hit 6 figures. The silence in this house is different now. It's not the heavy, suffocating silence of grief or loneliness. It's a clean silence. The sound of a system that's been flushed of a toxic leak. I don't check my phone every 10 minutes for a blue dot anymore. I'm telling you this story because I want you to have the armor I didn't have. If you're sitting where I was, staring at a screen thinking you found the one exception to every rule, Listen to 3 things that will save your life. First, run the reverse request rule. If you suspect you're being treated like a job site rather than a partner, don't argue and don't accuse. Cut the power. Tell them you've had a fake emergency, a tax audit, a frozen account, and ask them for $200 for groceries. A real partner who actually values your soul will stay on the line. They might not have the money, but they will try to help you figure it out. A predator only has an exit strategy. If they vanish the second the ATM goes out of order, you didn't lose a girlfriend. You just successfully ran a diagnostic test that saved your retirement. Second, get a geographic anchor. Never send a single dime for private clinics or visa expediting based on a story told over Skype. If there's a medical emergency, call the hospital yourself. Ask for a verifiable invoice. Look up the doctor on a government registry. I sent $4,500 to Central Medical Speranza because I let my fear override my business brain. If I'd spent 10 minutes looking for a physical address or a business license, I would have seen the whole thing was a ghost. Don't let your heart override your technical gauges. Third, understand that traditional values is the favorite weapon of the modern predator. They know exactly what we're looking for. They know we're tired of the games back home, so they play the part of the modest, home-oriented woman perfectly. Elena didn't send me glamour shots. She sent me photos of herself in a garden. She used my own decency and my respect for the old ways as the bait. If it feels like a script from a movie you've been dreaming about your whole life, it probably is a script. I lost $14,000, but I kept my soul and the rest of my life savings. Elena is out there right now, probably using the same photos and the same mother's gallbladder story on another man in Ohio or Michigan. If you are talking to someone right now who feels too perfect, run the pension test tonight. If they stay, they're real. If they block you in 20 minutes, I just saved you your retirement. Don't be a victim of your own kindness. If you've seen red flags like these, comment RO below so we can track these patterns together. Stay smart, stay guarded.